You ever gone cave diving? There's a word for it. I don't remember. Anyway, I used to go. Not professionally, mind you. Where I grew up, we didn't do much of anything professionally. You find strange things to fill your time as a kid in Arizona. The way it used to be, you were out of the house for as long as the sun was burning in the sky. I guess it was only a matter of time before a few of us found a cave. It was mine, I guess. I should say that because there's a difference. There's something like 100,000 abandoned mines in the state of Arizona. I learned about that after. I know the other 100,000 aren't like the one we found. 6 of us spotted it. Small hole on the top of a hill, framed like a square by a couple of 2x4s wedged into the earth. Barely wide enough for a body. Jim never came down. He got the creeps right from the start. The way he stood looking in that hole, shivering and dancing like there were worms in his shirt, the rest of us had a good laugh. Clint never came down either on account of being too big for the hole. Lucky for the rest of us, that meant nobody had to argue over who was going to be the lookout. Between Jim and Clint's 4 eyes, we'd know if somebody was coming. I guess in that way we knew we were doing something wrong. We had that kind of anxious excitement pumping in our veins, knowing that we might get caught doing something we weren't supposed to. The hole was new, though. It was something we'd never seen, something we'd never done. So we climbed on in anyway. It must have been a 30-foot drop. We spread our hands and legs to keep from falling, digging our feet and fingernails into the wet earth around us. It was hot and humid down there, practically a sauna. We joked that if Clint had come, he'd be as thin as the rest of us by the time we reached the bottom. Clint didn't laugh. I don't think he heard. Eventually, we slopped out to the bottom. We fell and whined and rubbed the sore spots on our bodies. It was weird. Somehow crawling down that tunnel felt like being born again. It was like we'd left our lives in Arizona behind and returned down there in the dark to the arms of Mother Earth. All 4 of us were in awe. Then we realized we didn't have a light. We climbed back up, much harder than the way down, and agreed to come back tomorrow with a rope and a flashlight. I never asked the rest of the kids if they dreamed about the cave. I did. I dreamed about standing in that darkness. It felt like home. The next time Clint didn't show, I think he was jealous of the adventure the rest of us was having. Jim stuck around, though, happy just to be included. Maybe he felt it tugging on him, too. The second trip wasn't particularly exciting. We landed in the tunnel, mine shaft, whatever, whipped out our flashlight and checked out the walls. They were wet. One of the other boys said something about running into an underground lake, drowning down there where no one could find us. There was a pang of fear in us all, I'm sure, but something about the mine kept us coming back. On the third trip, we heard them, chattering in the distance, in the direction we were headed. The walls weren't enough to keep us fixated anymore, and we all knew that the cave wanted us to travel deeper. We heard something like squirrels. Chattering, skittering. Sounded like little claws scraping in the dirt and stone. That was as far as we went. Then the weekend came and we all had to spend time with our folks. Saturday there was a cookout. Sunday was church. When we returned to the cave on Monday, after dreaming about it all weekend, we were 1 body short. We figured our missing party member had snitched and gotten themselves grounded. We learned after the fact that they were missing. I think now that they went down on their own, called back to the cave without us. The 4th time we saw them. A flash of white, low to the ground, crossing the beam of our flashlight so quickly that it might have been a bolt of lightning. Glistening, pasty white flesh. The 5th time, I went down alone. The others were convinced that we'd seen a sick animal or one of those lost species that always turned up on the sci-fi shows. I didn't care what it was. I wanted to be in that cave, and the cave wanted me there too. At the end of the line, that tunnel we were following opened up to a big chamber. I don't know what it was used for when the mine was still open, but I know that on that day, it was the source of an infestation. There must have been 100 of them. Short, wiry little men with ghost-white skin and chattering, ravenous mouths. If they had eyes or noses, they were too small for me to see. They didn't see my light. They didn't see me. But the cave must have told her children that I was there because all at once they stopped in their tracks and turned to face me. They stared with their mouths, might as well have stared into my soul. Might as well have taken a bite with how they left me after that day. I don't remember how I got out that last time. I came to next to Jim, who must have seen the fear in my eyes because he ran all the way back home. I hope he outran it, the calling of that cave and the creatures who lived there. I sure didn't. I dream of them every night. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the chatter. I can still hear their pointed nails, scratching the walls of the place that felt like home. As a kid, I spent quite a lot of time outdoors. I grew up around the salt marshes of South Carolina. There's a pretty unique culture around there. There's a lot of belief in magic, kind of dark magic, and lots of spiritualism. So I'm used to weird stories, but I never tended to give that much attention. Most everyone who spent enough time there has their own spooky story, but this is one of mine, that I never believed I would experience. When I first became a ranger, I didn't want to move too far away from home. I got a position at a state park at the bottom of South Carolina. Over a period of a couple weeks, we had started getting reports from campers of hearing weird, high-pitched screeching noises. And weirdly, people were complaining of moths. Our coastlines were having problems with these invasive tallow trees. And I think the government had released some insects, including moths, to eat the seeds for prevention purposes. In any case, I had been increasing my patrols, trying to keep an eye on everything. This one day when I was out, the woods just felt weird. They felt strangely alive for some reason. I don't really know how to explain it. Everything looked the same, but my surroundings seemed to be luring me in. I know it sounds crazy, but I was kind of used to the general strangeness of that area and didn't know any different. But when I started hearing that high-pitched noise, it was definitely something new to me. There was a weird urgency to it. I followed the sound through the woods. I didn't notice any specific bird or animal that could be making that noise. But I found a strange path where the vines had been bent and formed into bizarre shapes. There was this folklore around there that referred to sigils. Supposedly these are occult signs which represent various angels and demons and are used to summon people toward a bad end. Whatever these shapes were, they were really unnatural looking and gave me a really creepy feeling. But since I didn't believe in such things, I followed the path marked with these symbols through the wood. I used my walking stick to push the brambles out of my way, and I followed this tiny path. It was pretty short and oddly dark, as if the ground had been burnt. The path turned a corner and I saw this small area, just a small, like 5x5 spot of woods that was all burnt. There was a tree in front of me. It was charred and about a foot in diameter. The top half of the tree was all burnt up. I swore I could hear a low mumbling. The next second, I heard a loud crash coming from my left on the small trail I had come off of. I just dropped to the ground. As I was laying there, I saw a silhouette coming up the path. It kind of had the outline of feathers on it and was ungodly tall and humanoid, but sickly thin. It was going from tree to tree not very far from me and was looking all around, snapping its head back and forth and making a low, mumbling sound as it moved. Then it lifted its head up and broke out into that screeching sound. I saw its face that seemed to have no features and these horrible red eyes. By this time, I was lying flat on the ground in the tall grasses. I watched as it spread these incredible, leathery-looking wings and shot off down the path faster than anything I'd ever seen. That's the moment that I will never, ever forget. That moment was so quick. I mean, it was like the blink of an eye, but so powerful and striking. It's burned into my mind. It shot off, and then it seemed to lift up into the trees and disappear into the distance. I just ran. Not even the way I came. I didn't even care where I ended up as long as it was away from there. I ended up bursting out of the woods almost into somebody's campsite. I had to immediately tone down my fear and make my way back to the station acting like I was just fine. You can just imagine what my report must have sounded like to my supervisor. All they could really do was get the word out to all the rangers to be on the lookout for an unspecified, walking, flying creature. I honestly didn't tell anyone else until very recently. And now you. That was a few years ago now, and I'm no closer to an explanation than I ever was. I kind of hesitate to tell this story. I mean, police officers seem to get a bad rap no matter what we do these days. I don't want to be known as some delusional city employee who imagines things. But I guess if I stay anonymous, it's fine. I work in law enforcement in a small city in Kansas. I've been on the force a good 15 years. One morning, my partner and I responded to a call of a possible burglary in an older area of town not far from the station. We got there and scouted around the perimeter briefly before knocking on the front door. The elderly lady living alone there was terrified. She didn't open the door, but she stuck her head out of an upstairs window. She said she was too afraid to navigate through her house to open the front door for us. She told us where to find the key she had hidden in her yard. As we were communicating with her, we kept looking around for any sign of trouble. There didn't appear to be any sign of any kind of forced entry. The home had a front gate and everything appeared secure. We got inside and did a quick walkthrough of the upstairs. The woman spoke to us from her bedroom doorway. She would only open the door halfway and said she was staying put in her room. We got her name and details. She told us that she had been sitting in her chair when suddenly she started hearing banging on the interior door leading down into the garage. Many of the homes in that area are in a rowhouse setup on each block. The garages are on the ground floor with the residents on the floor above. A lot of these houses have areas downstairs offset from the garage that are often used as in-law rental units. At this moment in my story, we had only checked out the upstairs residence and had not yet accessed the garage downstairs. She said she had initially gone downstairs, but then the door handle started rattling. She described the banging as being incredibly loud, as if someone was kicking the door, and the door handle was shaking violently. She became terrified at the thought that someone had gotten into the garage and was trying to break into her residence. She had called 911, and my partner and I showed up. When we had this info, we asked for another unit to begin making its way toward our location. We pulled out our weapons and flashlights and swept the upstairs area more thoroughly. We went downstairs to investigate the quarters on the lower level. We opened the door and descended into the dark downstairs. All the curtains were closed and barely any sunlight was getting in. When we got some lights on, it was like a time capsule in there. The entire downstairs area was like stepping into the 1970s. There was lots of dust, but otherwise perfectly preserved food and alcohol, books and magazines, etc. When we stepped into the garage, we found that the automatic garage door was no longer operational, and a large, old, pristine Buick sat there looking like it never left the lot. We found a closed door in the back, and it led us into an old, unused in-law unit with vintage furniture and appliances. The place made us feel like we had totally stepped back in time. When we stepped into the unit's bedroom, it looked like someone had gotten up, walked out to do some errands, and had never come back. There were personal items, combs, brushes, makeup, and jewelry on the dresser. The closet was full of old suits, hats, and dresses. We searched in every conceivable place for a person to be hiding, and we could find nothing suspicious. All the entrances and windows were locked and secure. I've been to many burglaries and many home invasions, and I have never seen a place with no sign at all of an intruder. There were no footprints, and the dust wasn't disturbed. There were framed black and white photos and documents on the walls. One of them was a headshot of the lady we had met upstairs. I took a closer look, and to the right of her photo, there was a frame containing a birth certificate and a death certificate. The woman's name was on both, the same name that belonged to the woman upstairs. Next to her photo was a framed photo of an elderly man, and also his birth and death certificates hanging on the wall. At that point, every hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. When my partner saw the documents, we both just stared at each other, and then we ran back upstairs straight to the room where we'd spoken to her. The door was closed, and when we knocked, she didn't open it. We went into the room, and it was completely empty. Nobody and nothing was in there. Just an empty, dusty old room. We looked everywhere and found no sign of anybody. At that point, we canceled the other responding unit and went back to the station. Come to find out, the woman and her husband had been murdered in that house 30 years prior. Her son had been unable to move on from the event and had left the house like some kind of museum. As my partner and I left the station later and got back in our car, he just said, "I don't know, man. Do you believe in ghosts?" That was pretty much the end of that conversation, but this incident really still sticks with me. She had seemed completely real. Flesh and blood. If she wasn't real, how could she call 911? How could we have stood and talked to her face to face? It just all seems impossible and makes me question everything.